There exists a grocery chain so obsessively private that the precise size of its bank account remains hidden even from the cashiers who work there every single day. Inside the doors, you will find no piped-in melodies, zero flashy signage, and a barren ledge where you pack your own canvas totes like a hurried dock worker. And as we speak, this operation is quietly devouring the market share of every brightly lit supermarket you have ever set foot in. The methodology behind this quiet domination is nothing short of unnerving. Back in 1976, while the rest of the country was draped in red, white, and blue for the big 200-year anniversary and bass lines from the dance floor ruled the airwaves, a peculiar event transpired in the heart of the Midwest state of Iowa. A German food retailer cracked open its entrance without a whisper. No brass bands played. No local politician showed up with oversized scissors for a ribbon photo. It was merely a compact space stocked with strange packaging that looked foreign and suspicious to the American eye. Most pedestrians kept their heads down and walked on by without a second glance. The banner hanging outside read Aldi, a truncated mashup of the words Albrecht and discount. Two siblings hailing from Germany, Karl and Theo Albrecht, had laid the foundation for this whole empire using nothing more than their mother's modest corner shop in the wreckage following the Second World War. Germany was financially decimated. Bellies were painfully empty. The brothers therefore dedicated every waking moment to one singular mission: moving calories and household goods for less money than anyone else dared to charge. And they became frighteningly proficient at this singular task. Let us jump forward several decades to the landscape of the United States. For a very long stretch of time, Aldi just sort of hummed along in the background. Walmart was busy stealing every front-page headline, and Kroger was swallowing up square footage in every direction you could drive. Aldi remained compact and muted. Think of them as that quiet student seated in the corner of the lecture hall who never raises a hand, but somehow consistently aces every examination. This is the part of the narrative where the plot begins to thicken considerably. By the time we hit the year 2024, Aldi's footprint covered more than 2,400 individual storefronts spread across 39 different states. Please do not adjust your ears or suspect a misprint in the data. Within a short window spanning from 2017 up to 2023, they bolted an additional 800 brand new units onto that foundation. Let us break down the arithmetic in practical terms. That cadence equals roughly 2 fresh grand openings occurring every 7 days, week after week after week, for a continuous stretch of 6 entire years. A family member of mine was utterly convinced I was pulling his leg when I recited these figures. In his mind, Aldi remains that peculiar European outpost where you need a specific metal coin just to liberate a grocery cart from the corral. Yet raw data does not concern itself with personal skepticism. Aldi has now ascended to claim the bronze medal position as the third largest grocery purveyor within the United States when measured purely by total physical locations. That bronze medal means they stand directly behind only the two titans of the industry, Walmart and Kroger. And here lies the most astonishing component of this whole narrative. A vast majority of the populace still remains largely clueless as to the specific levers they pulled to make this happen, or the true secret behind those eye-poppingly low digits you see dangling from the shelf tags, or the curious reason why a doctor pulling in $500,000 a year will stand in line right behind a single parent scrutinizing every last cent. The quiet incursion from across the Atlantic was executed while every single one of their domestic rivals was distracted by something else entirely. How precisely does a grocery chain devoid of any glamour manage to slash retail pricing by close to 50% without shoveling out rotten junk to the customer base? That singular question reveals the absolute stroke of brilliance behind the Aldi playbook. Let us dissect the primary mechanism that allows them to achieve price points which make the competition appear as though they are engaged in outright banditry. Stroll through the automatic doors of any Aldi location and your brain will immediately register an absence. Where in the world are all the familiar labels you grew up seeing on television? The answer lies in the fact that approximately 90% of the merchandise occupying those shelves falls under the umbrella of private label goods. It is their proprietary inventory. There is no middle manager from Kellogg's demanding a slice of the action. There is no craft sales rep adjusting the margin upward. And if we are being entirely candid, this is precisely where the alchemy takes place. When a box of toasted oat circles sits on a conventional shelf at a big box chain, your wallet is being drained not just for the toasted grains, but for the $1 million Super Bowl spot, the royalty payments for the cartoon character on the box, the executive bonus for the C-suite occupant at General Mills, and the glossy cardboard printing that catches your eye. At an Aldi location, your expenditure is basically covering the cost of the toasted grains themselves and very little else. But the narrative becomes even more compelling once you look at the building envelope. Their stores are downright minuscule by modern retail standards. We are talking roughly 12,000 square feet of selling space. Your run-of-the-mill mega supermarket typically clocks in somewhere around 45,000 square feet. That differential is not marginal. It is a factor of almost 4 times the cubic volume. Additional square footage translates directly into heftier lease obligations, an astronomical climate control bill, and a veritable army of custodial staff running floor buffers into the early hours of the morning. Aldi assessed that equation and issued a firm and definitive rejection of the entire premise. And here comes the detail that caused my own jaw to go temporarily unhinged when I first learned about it. A standard Aldi location functions on a skeleton crew consisting of no more than 3 to 5 personnel present on the clock at any singular moment. 3 to 5 human beings operating the entire show. Walk into a competing regional grocer and you will likely count 20 souls just loitering around the prepared foods area, debating the optimal thickness for luncheon meat. Every single body that is not strictly necessary to keep the checkout lanes moving is an expense that Aldi simply refuses to absorb. Those cardboard shipping containers you see sitting directly on the metal shelving units are not evidence of neglect or sloppiness. They represent an elegant solution to a costly labor problem. Every corrugated box that remains sealed and upright is one that an employee did not have to touch and unpack. Every absent seasonal display saves countless hours of construction and teardown. Every single penny that is not spent on a frivolous overhead cost is a penny that ultimately migrates back into your own pocket as the consumer. The empirical evidence backs this up with authority. Multiple independent analyses confirm that Aldi's shelf tags consistently register 30 to 50% below the pricing seen at traditional full-service grocery outlets. And we are referencing parity in terms of the actual food quality. A gentleman who resides adjacent to my property once voiced the concern that cheap must necessarily equal suspect. He was operating under the assumption that they were hawking mystery meat with a questionable expiration date sourced from some shadowy purveyor named Vladislav. That assumption is demonstrably false. The cost reduction is not sourced from lowering the grade of the consumable product. It is derived solely from stripping away every conceivable ounce of wasted motion and excess financial weight that sits between the distribution warehouse and the spot where you place your reusable bag. No more and no less. However, this prompts the inevitable question from the cynical observer. If the goods are priced so aggressively low, surely the qualitative nature of the product suffers as a direct consequence, correct? The response to this particular line of questioning might very well jar the sensibilities of even the most entrenched brand loyalist. Let us address the prevalent and pervasive assumption that low financial outlay automatically correlates with low-caliber goods. The sort of stuff you might find gathering dust at a bargain basement dollar outlet. Flavor profiles that mimic shredded cellulose cloaked in a veneer of mild regret. This perception is entirely mistaken. The private label stock sold under the Aldi umbrella is subjected to a battery of testing protocols that are among the most stringent anywhere in the food distribution sector. And here is the true kicker in the teeth of the big brands. In controlled taste evaluations where the logos are obscured from view, Aldi's in-house offerings routinely achieve parity with, or in some cases outright trounce, the national name brand competitors. I am referencing direct side-by-side comparisons where the participants could not reliably differentiate the corporate giant from the store brand. Occasionally, the tasters expressed a distinct preference for the Aldi variant. Their top shelf tier of goods, marketed under the banner of Specially Selected, has accumulated genuine awards and commendations from industry watchdogs. We are not alluding to hollow tokens given out for simply showing up. Their artisan cheeses have bested competitors commanding a far steeper price. Their cocoa-based confections tell a strikingly similar story. I once sampled a bar of their dark chocolate while anticipating a thoroughly mediocre experience. At present, I find it necessary to sequester the supply away from other members of my own household to prevent its rapid depletion. But let us pivot toward the perimeter of the store and the matter of perishable produce and proteins. There is a nuance here that escapes the notice of the vast majority of shoppers. A more compact retail footprint almost always translates into superior freshness and turnover velocity. Consider the logic for a moment. A cavernous hypermarket places an order for a mountain of leafy greens and vine-ripe tomatoes that then languishes on the refrigerated rack for the better part of a week. Aldi's condensed square footage mandates a far more rapid inventory cycle. Distribution trucks arrive to restock the bins multiple times within any given calendar week. The head of romaine lettuce you are inspecting has not been sitting there idly since the previous geological era. And the organization stands behind their entire inventory with a policy they have branded the twice-as-nice guarantee. If a particular item fails to meet your expectations, bring it back. They will not only restore the full purchase price to your method of payment, but will also hand over a replacement unit of equal or similar value. They are essentially throwing down the gauntlet and daring you to find a reason to be dissatisfied. The publication known as Consumer Reports conducts those large-scale, comprehensive evaluations of grocery purveyors on an annual cycle. Attempt to guess which nameplate consistently secures a spot near the very apex of the customer satisfaction leaderboard. That would be Aldi. They are seated comfortably right there next to retailers whose price tags are effectively doubled. And this is the piece of information that truly resonates with me on a personal level. A significant portion of those Aldi-specific products are manufactured within the exact same industrial facilities and on the exact same production lines that churn out the premium label equivalents. Identical infrastructure, identical sourcing of raw inputs, differentiated only by the graphic design printed on the outer packaging. You are quite literally handing over additional currency simply to possess a specific trademark logo. A relative of mine remained steadfast in his refusal to accept this premise until I produced the verifiable records of shared factory codes. He had very little to say in the aftermath of that revelation. So the issue of qualitative output appears to be largely settled. But a separate and arguably more pressing question now looms. What about the safeguards related to health and the integrity of the ingredient panels? Because the conversation is about to take a turn into far more consequential territory. Now is the moment to confront the sizable creature that has been standing quietly in the corner of the room. The subject of health and the security of the food supply chain. Because accruing savings on the back end of a receipt means precisely nothing if the consumed product wreaks havoc on your internal biology, or comes loaded with compounds that require a degree in chemistry to even articulate. This is the juncture where Aldi's corporate policies genuinely caught me off guard. They have implemented a sweeping prohibition against the use of synthetic coloring agents across the entire spectrum of their exclusive branded food items, completely expunged from the recipe books. Oils that have been subjected to the partial hydrogenation process have been given their walking papers as well. The additive known as monosodium glutamate added as an enhancer has been shown the exit door. And they enacted these reforms well before some of the largest and most recognizable names in the grocery landscape even bothered to acknowledge that these ingredients represented a legitimate concern. Pause and let that timeline sink in for a moment. The store that is positioned as the budget-conscious alternative was leading the charge on ingredient cleanup while the premium-priced retailers were still dragging their feet. The standards that they impose upon their supply chain partners frequently exceed the minimum thresholds mandated by federal oversight agencies. This is not empty rhetoric crafted for a glossy marketing brochure. These are verifiable certifications and audit requirements that manufacturing facilities must maintain in order to preserve their standing as an approved Aldi vendor. Flunk a scheduled inspection and the business relationship is terminated without ceremony. And the protein department operates under far more rigorous guardrails than the average consumer gives them credit for. All fresh poultry that makes its way into their cold cases originates from farming operations and processing plants that adhere to strict limitations concerning the application of antibiotic therapies. Every single cut of beef, every portion of pork, and every bird passes through facilities that operate under the perpetual supervision of the United States Department of Agriculture. There are no back-alley detours taken in this logistical operation. Yet the expansion that genuinely impressed me on a personal level was the broadening of their organic certified offerings. In excess of 200 individual stock-keeping units now carry the green and white seal denoting compliance with both certified organic and USDA-verified standards. And these items are not quarantined to some obscure boutique corner of the store where you feel the need to tiptoe. They are integrated directly into the standard aisle flow at price points that will not require you to renegotiate the terms of your home loan. A neighbor of mine is raising a child with a life-threatening sensitivity to tree nuts and legumes. She confided to me that the clarity of Aldi's product labeling has been a genuine lifeline for her mental well-being. The presence of potential allergens is called out with unambiguous high-contrast typefaces. There is no need to squint while hunched over in harsh fluorescent lighting trying to decode a wall of microscopic legal jargon. The commitment to straightforward honesty extends to overall transparency. Curious about what is actually inside that jar? The information is accessible and plainly stated. Want to know the point of origin for that specific cut of meat? The answer is readily available. I can still recall a period in my own life when the pursuit of a wholesome diet and the pursuit of fiscal restraint felt like mutually exclusive and warring ambitions. It was akin to choosing between keeping the vehicle fueled and putting green vegetables on the dinner plate. Aldi decided that this particular dichotomy was a false and unnecessary construct. Cleaner ingredient profiles, rigorous oversight protocols, and tangible accountability. All of it wrapped up in those plain, unadorned cardboard packages. Yet there remains an aspect of the operation that people routinely undervalue: the variety and curation of the available assortment. Because of what tangible utility is a cheap and healthy store if the shelves are barren and devoid of the items you actually intend to purchase for your household? The earliest iterations of the Aldi concept in America felt somewhat akin to shopping inside a distribution center where someone had forgotten to complete the unpacking process. Roughly 700 items represented the entirety of the offering. That was the sum total. If you arrived with a desire for variety or a specific brand preference, you had entered the wrong establishment. Were you in the market for 17 different variations of prepared mustard? You were advised to seek out alternative accommodations. However, this is the area where Aldi executed a rather deft and cunning strategic pivot. They did not simply inflate the total product count by throwing random junk onto the shelves. They engaged in a process of careful curation and editing. The contemporary store layout now boasts approximately 1,800 distinct product offerings. That figure remains a mere sliver when contrasted with the 40,000-plus individual items crammed into the linear footage of a conventional full-service supermarket. But allow me to pose a rhetorical question that cuts to the heart of the matter. How many of those 40,000 line items do you actually physically remove from the shelf and place into your cart with any degree of regularity? Market research has consistently demonstrated that the typical family unit cycles through a repertoire of perhaps the same 100 items on a recurring 7-day loop. Aldi managed to decode this behavioral pattern many years prior to the advent of modern data analytics. Rather than furnishing 24 ketchup alternatives where 23 of them merely act as stationary shelf anchors gathering particulates, they stock a couple of truly excellent options. The result is a dramatic reduction in the psychological burden of decision fatigue. You move faster through the aisles, yet your cart arrives at the register equally full. Then we must address the phenomenon colloquially known as the Aldi finds aisle. This section of the store fundamentally altered the entire shopping dynamic. On a rotating weekly cadence, an utterly unpredictable assortment of random merchandise materializes on the racks. Outdoor seating furniture, electric countertop convection ovens, artisanal sweets imported from Bavaria, and on one memorable occasion, a supply of snorkeling apparatus. I want to be absolutely clear that I am not fabricating this detail for comedic effect. My spouse now strategically schedules our household procurement missions around the potential for what new oddity might have appeared in that central corridor. It functions as a sort of low-stakes treasure expedition where the buried prize is priced at $12, and you were previously unaware that you had a pressing need for it in your life. A rather shrewd bit of consumer psychology, is it not? The edible inventory has matured significantly as well. Freshly baked goods from the in-house bakery, premium-grade cuts of steak, and bottles of wine produced in limited quantities that actual accredited sommeliers have been forced to grudgingly acknowledge. There are now international delicacies with names I butcher phonetically but consume with unapologetic enthusiasm. Speaking specifically of the fermented grape selection, it is worth noting that Aldi vintages priced under $5 per bottle have repeatedly vanquished competitors costing $40 or more in strict blind tasting panels. A portion of the judges in these evaluations simply refuse to accept the results as valid. Seasonal rotations have been bolstered with equal seriousness. The winter holiday period ushers in authentic German Christmas bread known as Stahlen. The warmer summer grilling months bring forth an array of outdoor cooking essentials that rival the selection found in specialized boutique hardware shops. The autumnal candy reserves earmarked for trick-or-treaters seem to evaporate from my pantry storage with a velocity that defies rational explanation. The same storefront that once projected an image of bare-bones austerity now effortlessly satisfies roughly 90% of what a typical family unit genuinely requires on a weekly basis. All without the labyrinthine layout and the overwhelming sensory assault. But a curated selection means absolutely nothing if the process of exiting the store with your purchases becomes an interminable purgatory. And the way Aldi has engineered that final step of the journey has certainly caught a large number of people by surprise. There is an unspoken truth that most established grocery conglomerates would prefer to keep buried deep within their internal memos. The most valuable and reliable customer segment in their ecosystem is not the young urbanite wielding a smartphone full of digital coupons. It is the demographic aged 65 years and upward. And this particular cohort is migrating their weekly shopping allegiance to Aldi in numbers that can only be described as a torrential flood. Why is this demographic shift occurring with such force? Let us commence with the most self-evident factor. Incomes that are fixed and do not adjust upward to match the whims of inflation do not possess the same tensile strength they once did. When a Social Security disbursement is barely adequate to keep a roof over one's head, observing a reduction in the grocery line item by a full third registers as something akin to an unexpected fiscal windfall. A parent of mine described the sensation as a form of practical wizardry upon completing his inaugural trip. An identical cart loaded with the same essential goods, yet the total damage to the bank account was $40 lighter. But the appeal is not limited exclusively to the preservation of currency. The value of time must also be factored into the equation. The typical expedition to a sprawling conventional supermarket devours a full 60 minutes of a person's waking existence. The identical mission executed inside an Aldi location takes roughly half of that duration. It is a matter of entering the building and exiting the building with minimal friction. For an individual whose joints are not quite as limber and resilient as they were in younger decades, reclaiming that 30 extra minutes to be seated comfortably in a chair represents a value that far outstrips any paper coupon. Compact stores mandate less physical locomotion. Full stop. The generous width of the throughways easily accommodates mobility aids and personal wheelchairs, without necessitating the uncomfortable and often awkward dance of trying to navigate around oncoming traffic. The architectural flow of the space is intuitive and logical. You do not find yourself hunting frantically for a loaf of bread in aisle number 17 when every instinct in your body is screaming that it belongs somewhere near aisle number 3. Then there is the psychological dimension that rarely gets discussed aloud. The sprawling expanse of a supercenter can induce a state of genuine cognitive overload. 40,000 items vying for attention, blinking digital price boards, software demanding you download their proprietary application, and loyalty membership cards that require you to recite your home telephone number at the point of sale. The entire ordeal is simply draining. Aldi strips all of that away and returns to the fundamental exchange. The numeric value displayed on the shelf edge is the precise numeric value that will be tendered at the register. No cards to swipe, no apps to sync, no games to play. One customer interviewed by a local news outlet in the state of Ohio confessed that she wept openly during her first transaction at an Aldi. Not from sorrow or distress, but from a profound and sudden sense of relief. 73 years of age, and she had finally located a retail environment that did not make her feel foolish or inept for failing to keep pace with the relentless march of digital interfaces. That is an impactful testament to the power of simplicity. The unadorned and transparent approach strikes a chord of nostalgia with older shoppers. It harkens back to an era when commerce functioned without the prerequisite of a passcode, and before the simple act of acquiring a gallon of milk required a device with more computing power than the spacecraft that put men on the moon. Clean and uncluttered flooring, adequate and efficient illumination, a predictable and consistent layout, and pricing that requires no advanced calculus to understand. Is any of this revolutionary or earth-shattering in the grand scheme of human innovation? It is not. Is it fundamentally respectful of the customer's time and cognitive bandwidth? Without any doubt whatsoever. But the true existential threat that keeps the chief executive officers of the major grocery behemoths awake at night is not merely the defection of the senior demographic. Aldi is actively poaching a segment of the customer base that the titan of Bentonville Walmart had long assumed was safely in their back pocket and completely unassailable. Walmart operated for decades under the assumption that they had permanently secured the bottom tier of the pricing pyramid. 30 years of the mantra, always low prices, echoed across every available media channel. Billions of dollars were expended to brainwash the collective consciousness of the United States into believing that the colossal blue big box represented the absolute final destination for any pursuit of a bargain. Then Aldi entered the arena and proceeded to overturn the entire board game. This is the part that defies conventional wisdom. While Walmart and the vast network of Kroger subsidiaries were pouring literal billions of dollars into advertising expenditures over the previous fiscal year, Aldi's outlay in that same category was a mere rounding error in comparison. And where did those unspent marketing dollars end up? They were channeled directly into the numbers that appear on the price tags hanging from the shelves. There are no paid celebrity spokespeople grinning at you from billboards. There are no elaborate multi-million-dollar commercial spots airing during championship football games. There are merely less expensive groceries sitting on the shelves. And the tangible outcomes speak with a volume that cannot be ignored. Aldi's revenue trajectory climbed by a robust 9% during the calendar year 2023. 9% growth in a mature and saturated market. In the same window of time, the old guard of traditional grocers were observing their store foot traffic metrics collapse like a poorly constructed dessert left out in the summer humidity. The customers were not merely dipping their toes into the Aldi waters out of curiosity. They were packing their bags and moving in for the long haul. Yet the core stroke of brilliance extends beyond the obvious price differential. It is the strategic placement of the physical real estate. Those sprawling Walmart supercenters demand acres and acres of paved parking surface and direct access to major arterial roadways. Aldi operates with a far smaller and more nimble physical footprint. They inject themselves into the interstitial spaces that the behemoths cannot physically access. Urban core neighborhoods and small rural townships that the giants deem too insignificant to service. That aging strip mall location on the edge of town that everyone else had long since written off as obsolete. A close associate of mine resides in a dense residential section of Brooklyn. The nearest Walmart location requires a 40-minute vehicular journey under optimal traffic conditions. His nearest Aldi location is a brief 6-block stroll from his front stoop. The outcome of that particular logistical equation was predetermined before it ever began. And this is the detail that truly stunned the number crunchers and market analysts on Wall Street. Aldi's appeal is not restricted solely to those who are forced to pinch pennies due to economic necessity. Households with annual incomes that exceed the $100,000 threshold are also frequenting these stores. These are individuals who do not require the financial savings to make ends meet. They are drawn to the operational efficiency of the environment. The ability to traverse the entire store and be back in the car within 20 minutes is a far more compelling value proposition than wandering aimlessly through the endless canyon of breakfast cereals. When the spike in consumer prices hit the nation with full force in the year 2022, Americans went on the hunt for any port in the storm. Which entity ultimately emerged as the grocery purveyor experiencing the most accelerated rate of growth during that period? It was not the massive conglomerates with their sophisticated mobile platforms and their membership subscription fees. The response from the incumbents has oscillated between panic-stricken and borderline farcical. Walmart initiated hasty and expensive store redesign programs. Kroger scrambled to implement across-the-board price reductions. The management at Target appeared visibly shaken. All of this reactive flailing was prompted by a privately held German enterprise whose most recognizable gimmick involves a 25-cent deposit required to unlock a shopping cart. It turns out they had accurately deciphered what the American consumer was actually yearning for all along. However, rapid expansion inevitably brings a fresh set of challenges and unforeseen complications. And the next series of moves that Aldi is preparing to make on the chessboard may just catch the entire industry off balance once again. So what exactly transpires when the perpetual underdog finally ascends to the role of alpha in the pack? Aldi is displaying no signs of applying pressure to the brakes. In fact, the throttle is being pressed down with increased urgency. The corporate leadership has broadcasted a formal intention to cement their standing as the third largest grocery purveyor in the United States by the time the calendar flips to 2028. And this is not a plan contingent upon creative accounting tricks or fudging the numbers on store counts. This is predicated upon genuine brick-and-mortar expansion that will see them leapfrog over the established player known as Albertsons. But the truly intriguing subplot of this narrative involves an announcement made in 2023 that landed like a seismic event. Aldi finalized the acquisition of approximately 400 Winn-Dixie and Harvey's supermarket locations scattered across the southeastern quadrant of the country. One stroke of the pen and 400 individual storefronts changed hands. That is not the slow and methodical crawl of organic growth. That is a declaration of intent delivered with a megaphone. Almost overnight, markets in regions that had only a cursory awareness of Aldi's existence are suddenly facing multiple new locations. The states of Georgia, Florida, and Alabama. The grocery landscape of the American South has just undergone a tectonic realignment. And they are not simply rebranding the existing structures and walking away. They are actively reimagining the interior experience. The newest generation of Aldi locations features greatly expanded refrigerated and frozen sections to accommodate shifting consumer habits. There is a noticeable increase in the breadth of organic and fresh perimeter offerings. The lighting has been upgraded to a warmer, cleaner spectrum that does not evoke the ambiance of a Cold War-era fallout shelter. The aisle widths have been increased based on direct feedback solicited from the people who actually push the carts. My own neighborhood location recently underwent a comprehensive refresh. To be entirely truthful, the resulting atmosphere feels less like a discount warehouse run and more like a routine grocery expedition. It simply costs a great deal less at the end of the journey. Now I can almost anticipate the objection forming in your mind at this very moment. What about the digital realm? Online ordering platforms and home delivery services are the future of retail, are they not? Surely Aldi's famously stripped-down operational model cannot possibly compete in that high-tech arena. That assumption would once again prove to be inaccurate. The company is currently engaged in testing a curbside pickup program within a selection of specific metropolitan markets. Partnerships with third-party delivery aggregators are being deployed and expanded incrementally. But here lies the clever nuance of their approach. They are not jettisoning the core principles that have brought them this far. The relentless efficiency of the in-store operational flow remains utterly sacred. The aggressively low price points continue to hold steady without being eroded by delivery costs. The addition of digital convenience features is being positioned as an optional adjunct rather than a mandatory replacement. The elderly gentleman who resides next door to me has zero desire to download an application. His requirements are quite simple: affordable eggs and a frictionless, expeditious shopping trip. Aldi appears to understand this dynamic with perfect clarity. What began as a peculiar, small-scale German experiment tailored specifically for the most frugal and thrifty segments of the population has metamorphosed into something that very few industry pundits ever saw coming. It has evolved into a fully legitimate alternative for mainstream families across the American socioeconomic spectrum. Whether they are flush with disposable income or just scraping by, whether they dwell in a dense urban core or a remote rural outpost, whether they embrace every new piece of technology or view it with deep suspicion. The grocery giants of the previous century spent multiple decades constructing their sprawling empires of brick and glass. Aldi spent that same time constructing something arguably more resilient. A smarter and more sustainable method of acquiring the things we all need to live. a better way to navigate the weekly ritual of the grocery shop. And it would appear that the rest of America has finally woken up to the quiet revolution that has been taking place right under their noses. If you found this deep dive into retail strategy even remotely enlightening, please take a quick moment to tap that like button for my channel and help this story reach more curious minds.